And we've been working together for like 3 years now. So before we get into like what went on today, I wanted to ask you a question about like in these 3 years, in years before, because we had M2P, you've had a lot of professional growth and things that have come down the pike and professional development. You've worked hard to fine tune your craft, and you really care so deeply about the kids' learning. I'm wondering if you could share some teaching strategies that you have consistently kept as part of your practice. Either, you know, something, it doesn't have to be an everyday strategy, or it can be, but what kinds of things have you pulled from the last, you know, 3, 4, 5 years that you have ingrained into your practice?
I think student talk and just getting kids to work together and to verbalize their understanding with each other. I feel like it's super powerful, and I see the difference when I don't do it versus when I do. You know, like I can have a class where, you know, it's like crickets, and then it's like, okay, no, we gotta talk, right? And I would say that, and working on whiteboards, and I think there's something powerful often about having them get up and do it, you know, and some kids, you know, are looking at other kids' solutions, and maybe that's what they needed, you know, but I think it forces them up and in the open and not hiding, you know, because it's easy to hide when you're at your seat. But there is, I feel like there's also a place for the partnering at your tables too. So I just think student talk, you know, in engaging the kids in the math.
And what, like, so you're saying student talk and them being able, like the whiteboards are helping like, engage that, right? Are there strategies that you have, like I saw you today do the AB partner and it was just seamless, right? Is that's something that's natural in your class? I could tell.
Yeah, I started in the beginning, and you know, I don't do the AB anymore because I don't need to, but like I used to in the beginning of the year have slides that says A with a sentence starter and B with a sentence starter, but you know, now they know who A is, now they know who B is, and for the most part, the A will start the conversation, and they like that. They won't say that, but they like to know who's going to talk first. Otherwise, it's like awkward, right? So they want me to tell them. They're not going to admit that, but they do. They want me to say, A, you go first, and then B can go. Oh.
And so you explicitly, somebody who comes in and sees you do that, they won't know that you explicitly taught that. So every year you start by teaching that. You said I no longer need that. You still use a strategy, but you no longer need to like dial it into, okay, A, this is your sentence, B, this is your sentence.
Sometimes it just depends on what we're learning.
You guys done with your meeting? Sorry, I had to interrupt you. There's this.
You want to be on video?
More so. Never mind. I just had to holler at you, but holler at me before you leave, okay, Joe?
Okay, I will.
Yeah, is there anything else that so student talk, that's been a big one for the last couple of years for you?
I also, I think questioning, questions for students, I've gotten better over the years at asking questions to get them to think deeper about it, or, you know, to help lead them but not tell them. So I feel like I've worked at that piece.
Yeah. Okay. I have also, like, because we've worked together for so many years now, I mean, that's kind of, I started thinking about what have I seen you do in your classroom that is consistent, and it consistently builds upon student learning and access. And same thing, I had student voice and talking routines. I see with this curriculum a lot of that building curiosity that you have, like today, and I've seen it before, that you're really building that curiosity before you jump. no matter if it's an advanced class or a core class. Making the connections. I saw that today too, of like, do you remember what we did last week? And I continuously see you make connections for kids so that they see it connected all the way across and access. Your value in collaborating, when you're really listening to them and asking them questions and you're truly engaged in it and curious about their thinking and allowing them time to share that with others. That productive struggle, I think that in the last 2 years I've seen you hone in on that productive struggle piece. How do I provide it? Which goes back to everything you're talking about, the questioning and the setting up the stage for collaboration. And then definitely the questioning. I noticed a huge shift in your questioning techniques in the last couple of years, versus like the direct instruction. And some of that comes from the really digging in with our curriculum.
Yeah, definitely.
Today's impact, so your goal was just, you wanted to pay close attention to student work and how partners work and talk and how to support students to move past that struggle or ask questions of each other. You said with this class, they tend to not want to talk until they know they have the actual answer. So I know that was a hope for your students today, and there were moments today in the lesson that I felt like your teacher move supported that student thinking and that learning, and there were some critical moments. And I could share those, but thinking back on your lesson, where did you feel like those were critical moments in your lesson that you really shifted your instruction to support that?
I can't remember at what point, but I think I was supporting 2 students, and then I realized when I really looked around the room at the boards, I realized that, okay, there's only a couple groups or maybe 3 groups that were really starting to dig into the equation. And I was curious initially to see where this corner here was going with their tables, and I was hoping to see them, come up with a strategy for using the table, and have some epiphanies about that. And then when I saw that they were just, they weren't really making progress other than just continuing the same thing, it wasn't very efficient, I kind of knew that I needed to put the next slide up with the questions.
Is that when that was the first time when you stopped and said, hey, let's take a break?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard now to kind of reflect, because afterwards I could, I kind of, immediately was thinking about, like that would have been good to stop a little sooner and actually have looked at their work and kind of talked about like why, and questioning them with the whole group, like why, what are you thinking you're going to do with this table, and what are you trying to get to, because I think what they were trying to do is get to 0, right? They're trying to figure out where it's going to hit the y-intercept, so I think it would have been interesting to look at in the room different strategies for getting to the equation, and hearing more from the students about what they were thinking, because I let it go so long that it really just ended up being that, time for that back group. What I've done in the past too is I've taken pictures of everybody's solution when we run out of time, and then I say, okay, we'll come back to it tomorrow, and then I put them up on the whiteboard, and then we go back and we'll look back at other people's solutions, which I'm kind of bummed I didn't do that with some of those, because it's fun to have them kind of go back and reflect on what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a lot of good thinking. I wish I could have heard some of the conversations, but I really do think they dug in. I was happy with, for the most part, the work they were doing together.
Where are you gonna go from here, Amanda?
I was gonna kind of just name the 2 shifts that I saw,
Mm-hmm.
and then come back to this idea
Mm.
of what she's talking about.
Yeah,
Like,
nice.
because she's kind of naming next steps.
Yeah,
right?
around like, yeah, like what a conversation can look like that might
Yeah.
summarize or use a student's work, and I think sounds great.
But kind of
You
just
wanna name those
naming a
shifts?
couple of them, because she said
Yeah,
like, it's hard to
exactly.
think about it after
Yeah.
the fact, and it's
Yep.
easy for me to like
Mhm.
on the backside you can see
Mhm.
some of the shifts you made
Yeah.
that pushed conversations forward, which was your goal.
Totally.
Okay, so I mean, I picked out 2 things. You wanted to keep the thinking and talking on kids through your questioning, and you had turn and talks with a purpose. You opened questioning, like your questioning, we were talking was so natural. It was like you just went with the flow. The questions just flowed out, and they were open but targeted. Like your notice and wonder, for example. By the time you got to your, you allowed them to notice and wonder, and the curiosity kept building and building. You could feel the little rumbles, right? And then by the time they went to the wonder, you turned it to the math, which is exactly what that video is for, right? You wanted to give them a lens prior to jumping into that. And I think that opened up a ton of access for them. And then it allowed them something to talk about. You prompted their thinking, asking them to reflect on their own process. You said, what do you need to determine if they're going to meet? You said, how will the equation help you? And then, is the work you're doing helping you get there? And that was kind of that was a great teacher move. And it was just, I don't know if you had thought about that question prior. I don't know if that was one of your questions that you thought about prior, but you had given them time to develop that, and then you kind of talked about what was needed, or they talked about it. Nothing came from you. Everything was like an open question that came from them. Somebody said, we need the equation. You said, is your work giving you that? Then you floated it back out, and I saw, like, back in that corner back there, the kid said, I don't have my notes up, but he said something like, we need an equation, and then the other kid says, yeah, I think that would be important, and then they start talking. I don't know if they ever came to that that equation, right? But the fact that they thought that, you said, I wonder what else you could, one said, I'm done, we're done, we drew the lines, they don't meet. And you said, oh yeah, but that's not really accurate. I wonder if there's another way that you can think about showing that. And so really you kept it on the kids, for the kids. The other thing is you got around the room. You collected data, you facilitated the next steps in the discussion, you scanned to see where they were at, you saw those tables, you saw what they were doing in between. You went to the kids that weren't really knowing where to go. You listened to them. You circulated and listened. You noticed when groups had a visual that could support maybe some thinking later, and your pacing was good. You gave hints. You pulled them back together. There were 2 times in the lesson where you stopped it and you pulled them back together. And I thought that was really giving them that they were starting to go like this, and you noticed it, and you brought them whoop, right back, and then let them out, whoop, and let them go. And I think that speaks to you wanting them to hold that thinking, and it's hard. And like when I asked you, how about your slides? You were like, they don't need them right now, and you were spot on. I mean, everybody was doing something. You knew that wasn't the time that you wanted to float that. There needed to be a reason for that slide, and you didn't even go through that whole slide. You talked about that first question. You opened it up. A couple people said something, and you were like, "Go back to your work." That was a nice teacher move.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to get that that productive struggle. Like, I think that's something that I am also working toward, because it's easy sometimes to just jump in and want to rescue,
Yep.
and giving time for them, but knowing when, okay, now it's, the productive struggle, and now it's the giving up stage, like that sweet spot where you have to recognize. And so I felt like we were still at a point where they were trying to figure it out for themselves, so I didn't want to take that away.
Yeah. And I saw you work with a couple groups, and you just brought this up a couple minutes ago, just saying you wished you would have stopped question them whole group, or you wish that they would all would have heard those conversations. You know, you had some great conversations going on, and then there were a couple groups who raised their hand, wanted to wait until you got over there, or just wanted to talk to you, didn't want the partner talk. And so you, I mean, you kind of named it at the beginning here. You were like, I wish everybody could hear those conversations, and it's hard, right? At what point do you pull back and bring that whole conversation there? And
Because I wonder if I would have stopped, you know, like, and instead of waiting until the end to have that conversation, if I would have stopped midway through, and that's what I was thinking when you guys left, is like, where we could have, again, me not saying anything, but just drawing from them, like, you know, I see you guys making a table, you know, what are you thinking with your table, and, you know, looking at their work, but having it as a whole group where we could, you know, kind of look at what's kind of happening and letting them voice some things, and so they could hear from each other about what they're doing, and that might have been interesting to see what they would gain from each other. That
So
they
what would that
didn't
look
gain.
like? Like in your
Well-
head, what does that look like?
Well, what I was thinking is you know, the same thing, like I could stop the whole group, right, and say, hey guys, I wanna talk about, you know, some of the work that I'm seeing, right, and you know, I would said, okay, let's take a look at this corner group at the tables that they're making, okay? You guys, can you explain to the class what you're doing and why? Like, what's your reasoning about, you know, with the tables? What are you trying to get at? And then hearing what they have to say, right? And I don't really know where that's gonna go, but, you know, if they said, well, we wanna see where the y-intercept is, and I could say, okay, is there another way we could find the y-intercept? Because, you know, what is it gonna take for you to actually get to the y, you know? And then they might be saying, well, we gotta keep counting down. And I'm like, well, you're at 62, you know, you're gonna go keep counting down.
And I'll bet a group would have piped up and said, wait, you know,
Right,
like that's a long time.
right. And maybe we could have gotten to this group here and, you know, been able to say, okay, well, or maybe they would have piped up and, you know. So I think that would have been something I would have changed if I could go back and redo it.
Yeah, yeah. Or something that you can do on the next round, right?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
you think about on the next one, because all this transfers to
Yeah, yeah.
any problem in MSN,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
In the math work.
Which, yeah.
I did want to ask, like, so, and we didn't get really a chance, like, in the moment with the kids to talk. You said, I'm gonna look around, and I wanted to say, what are you looking for? But you know, I'm a slow thinker, and
Well,
that would
sometimes
have
it's
caused
hard for me when
more.
you're, you know, in the middle when you're in here, like my brain is really trying to. There's so much.
Yes.
And sometimes when you come to me, I just like it. It adds a little bit to the stress, and like I think you want something from me, and there's part of me that just wants to say, well, what is it that you think I need to do? Cause
Oh,
just
like
tell
I have
me.
the agenda kind of thing.
Yeah, and like but you're
Gotcha.
like just like I do with kids, where we're
Yeah.
trying to pull it from them. I feel like
Right.
you're pulling it from me, and I'm like, I got
What
all
do
the
you want?
like all the stuff going on, and so I get a little stressed, and so like I'm just trying to think like how to make the coaching, and I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I appreciate
How
that.
to make the coaching not feel stressful, like and that you know, like for me personally, like it, because of who I am, like it might have been better to say, hey Jill, this is what I'm seeing, you know, do you know, maybe you could consider doing this, or do you think it might be a good time to talk, instead of questioning me in the moment, because at the moment I have all these students that I'm
So
answering.
you'd rather
and
float like, hey,
Oh, no,
here's
yeah.
here's a couple of things that you might think about, and then you get to
Yes.
choose instead of waiting.
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's awesome.
Like
and,
if
and
you
that's what I
noticed,
need to know. 'Cause
yeah,
that-
if
awesome.
you
Yeah.
noticed that in that moment when you came to me, and I was just
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
you know, because I wasn't ready to process, because I was still processing
Yeah,
what
yeah,
was
yeah.
happening around the room, and you know, had already kind of seen it, right? So like, you know, just maybe helping me recognize that
and give some
saying,
choices instead
yeah.
of saying, what do you think? I want to know, and that's good feedback for me, and good feedback like when we work together again, or even when I'm working with somebody else, because I'm always timid. Like, do I float them ideas that I'm seeing? I don't want to be like, hey, you should do it this way. I know, you know. But I mean, we have a safe relationship. I want to know, like, when you went and you walked around and you stopped at those two, were you looking, like, it was so, your summary was so awesome. Like, you had the first one, they were talking about the Y-intercept, and then you went to the other one for the other vehicle, for the equation. Was that in your mind when you looked at that? I think back to like M2P when we're trying to figure out like which one am I going to show in which order. Is that really what I wanted to say, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
But we just didn't have time, right?
No, I had talked to both of them and I said, hey, you guys, I'd like to have you explain, and
That's what I wanted to know.
I
Okay.
kind of prepped both of them, like, you know, I'm gonna have you guys explain this one, and then you explain this one, and then what was good, because the group 9 was struggling a little bit, and then I could bring it back to 8 again.
And they weren't the perfect group.
No.
I mean, they were like,
No.
they didn't get it like that. So they were a struggling group. And like I told you before, that one boy who was not engaged, that was his jam. He was over there. So then it made me wonder, like, he had some kind of reason why he was listening, right? And I wonder, how can you get that reason to everybody during the summary? And I don't know what that answer is, you know, but is there a lens that a reason that they should be listening to it? Or it made me want to talk to him. Like, he was just, you know, so disengaged before, but then totally into listening to his classmates explain that, which,
Yeah, it's interesting, that was ordered.
yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, he physically got up and moved.
Yeah, maybe he was struggling and kind of had one of those give up moments, and then was like, okay, let me try to figure this out.
Or like, wait, I was onto that too.
Yeah.
How did I not get through it? Yeah, yeah.
Where are you
Um,
thinking of going from here? Let me just ask you. I'll ask
I-
you a question.
I- no, that's okay.
Okay.
I was just thinking, yeah, I know how you feel.
I should
No.
probably- Just tell you. No, I'm just
Because I
kidding.
feel like that. No, I was thinking we kind of just did that next step. I mean, she's,
Yeah.
like we talked before, Joel's so reflective about, okay, what would I do differently? What do
Uh-huh.
I want to do on my next
Yeah.
step? And that transfer of that next step, it's not specific to this lesson. And,
Right.
and I kind of heard you say that when we started the other day with coaching, with the planning conversation. You are looking for something that's not lesson specific, something that
Yeah.
you can do
Yeah.
to multiple lessons, and that debrief or that stop and look around and let's talk about other people's learning and thinking and giving them that opportunity is that. I think that your goal was really clear throughout the whole lesson. You didn't carry any of the thinking, and you know, I think back to 2-3 years ago, and of course we had different curriculum too. It would have been like, here, let me show you, you know, and then you would have asked them questions. There is nothing that you gave them at all, except for great question stems. Is
Yeah.
like thinking about the lesson too. I don't know your kids. Were there certain kids that you were looking at to get them engaged in this, or that you knew were struggling with that concept earlier? I know that like they'd been practicing the systems of equations and writing equations, so this gave them that real life application to transfer that information onto it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some kids that I know need extra support. Unfortunately, I hate this corner in the back because they get so crammed in there, and there were some kids in there that needed Daniel, the one that I had him sit down a couple times. Like he needs the support, and I definitely didn't get back in this corner the way I needed to, because I kind of got hung up here. But yeah,
On the flip side, and I agree, like that becomes like a little cluster issue and then some disengage. But on the flip side, I saw them looking at each other's, and these guys that started with the point in that table, the other ones were trying to like figure out where it was going, and so it was kind of giving them a jumping off point.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, where that, so I didn't
Yeah.
have anywhere I was going. Sorry.
Yeah, I think, well, I think like framing. So I mean, you've named some big shifts that have been made. I mean, Jill named some shifts that have been made. Like this shift towards like really building a discourse-based classroom. This shift towards like keeping an eye on whole classes learning and small group, like this ability to dip in and dip out, and the shift about like keeping the thinking on kids. And then I mean, Jill named the next step really around like using like how do we best. Kids had such rich work on the boards. Like how do we leverage that and when. Like, when is the right moment to leverage everything that's on boards, and then how? Like, how do we do that in a way that, like, so I wonder, I mean, that feels like a really awesome next step. I mean, I just think a lot of people don't ever get to thinking about, like, that part of the structure, right? Because so much that, like, I mean, she's in a place, there's so many things in place and so much alignment that kids are doing really rich work on boards and now thinking about how to leverage that. So I wonder
Yeah,
about,
and you already are by recreating
Yeah.
the table and thinking about tomorrow. How do
right, so I
bring
wonder
it back?
about, like,
You
just-
can talk to her in a second.
just framing her next step and then,
Let the
you know,
lady go home.
using that as going
Yeah.
into some more coaching
Oh.
work.
Okay.
Yeah. You wanna wrap it up there? Just like frame what the next step might be and then.
I think you just did.
Yeah, well, I want you to try it, like, try to
Okay.
kind of put together some of the shifts you've made and,
Okay, so I hear you saying that your next step is leveraging student work to move the thinking forward and allowing all students to be able to talk about what's going on at different boards. And then allowing them to try some different things or see some strategies that maybe aren't, that are good strategies but aren't, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Efficient.
Efficient, thank you,
Mhm.
strategy, and letting them move into that, so. Something to think about maybe on the next few sections
Yeah.
in
No,
the, in
no,
the,
I
in the
think so.
domain book.
It was good. It was, you know, like I said, once you left, I was just kind of reflecting. I was like, yeah, that would have been ideal.
And I wonder if you could try
Trying
it out.
to do that more.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's something that you can try out with the core 8. I know it'd be way different, cause they might not have what they had on there.
Sometimes it's surprising because sometimes I've been able
It
to
can
get
kinda try it out.
some key people in the room that you know were able to get somewhere with it. So
Mhm.
you know,
It might be
they,
something.
They surprise you.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And because you already taught this lesson, you already know where it's going,
It helps.
it might be a time that you can think about, I'm gonna try, you know, I'm gonna try this to get that leverage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Ellen.
Cool.